Welcome guys, welcome back to Minko's Corner. Once again, we're back with Belisarius, War and Plague. It's a series that I've been doing on my channel. You can go back in my channel and watch all the parts as they came out. I know, I'm back with history. I'm sorry guys, I really apologize for the people who started the channel and I started with history and now I'm into music kinda, so, you know, I apologize. I'll start doing more history, I'll start doing more, just whatever I want. Okay, so I'm gonna try to just expand this as much as I can. Anywho guys, War and Plague, let's go on.
540 AD. Khosrow, Sassanid king of Persia, is invading the Eastern Roman Empire. His huge army marches along the banks of the Euphrates River. Sura falls before them. Hierapolis is ransomed for 2,000 pounds of silver. Berea burns.
Not a lot. 2,000 pounds!
Then,
so
to the horror of all Romans, Khosrow takes Antioch, second city of the empire, the Roman capital of the Near East.
No way, really?
The city burns. Soldiers flee. Civilians are massacred.
What is Antioch nowadays? Syria?
The historian Procopius writes, "I become dizzy as I write about such a great calamity and transmit it to future times to remember. I cannot understand why it should be God's will to exalt the fortunes of a man or place and then to obliterate them for no cause that is apparent to us."
Yeah. God is a
After years of victories, Justinian's empire is rocked by this devastating onslaught.
So
The emperor...
he was emperor for, give or take, 38 years. Pretty long reign, because, you know, you have to think, back in the day with the level of medicine they had, I mean, you know, it's insane to think how primitive, in many ways, medicine was, not even 120 years ago, when there wasn't even any anesthetic, let alone 1,500 years ago.
Can send only his cousin Germanus and 300 soldiers, with a promise of a great army to follow. But there is no great army. Roman forces are tied down fighting Justinian's wars in the west.
Okay.
Instead, he will dispatch his greatest general, Belisarius, and pray for a miracle, little knowing that the empire is about to be plunged into an even greater catastrophe.
The Justinian Plague!
Unlike anything the world has ever seen.
I've always heard about it, you know, the Justinian Plague. I never knew what it was all about. I knew it was around, you know, the emperor, but...
Before.
How many will die? Okay.
First, a big thanks to our video sponsor, Endel. Middle East, had signed a treaty of eternal peace.
Oh my God!
8 years before.
Oh, I love those eternal peace.
But Khosrow had
2 years later,
growing alarm, as Roman forces led by Belisarius had reconquered first North Africa, then Italy.
Okay, so basically what happened? 476, the Western Roman Empire falls, and then in 80 years later, the East sort of unifies it. I don't know how long that's gonna last, but...
Half in jest, Khosrow asks Justinian for his share of the tribute, since these victories are only possible because he's granted the Romans peace. But the joke is wearing thin. Khosrow receives envoys from the Goths in Italy and the Armenians, who beg him for aid. Justinian, they tell him, has conceived the desire of seizing the entire earth. He will march against the Persians with those he has already enslaved, respecting neither the name of friendship nor any of his sworn promises. In 540, Khosrow accuses the Eastern Emperor of paying Huns to raid Persian land and trying to bribe his Arab allies to switch sides.
Oh, good old propaganda.
Then he attacks. Justinian has stripped the frontier of its best troops to reinforce his army in Italy. There is no Roman force that can stand up to Khosrow's invasion. Antioch is sacked. Survivors are enslaved and sent to Persia. Khosrow then marches to the coast and symbolically bathes in the waters of the Mediterranean. He moves on to Apamea, where he demands 1,000 pounds of silver, but lets the priests keep their piece of the true cross. He then fixes the local chariot race, so that Justinian's favourite team, the Blues, lose.
Talk about being petty. That's petty, man. What the hell?
Agrees to pay Khosrow 5,000 pounds of gold, with 500 more to be paid annually in exchange for a truce. Satisfied, Khosrow sets off for home. However, he does not let the truce prevent him from extorting several more payments en route. It is the Eastern Roman Empire's greatest military humiliation in 3 centuries.
Whew.
Everyone was talking about Belisarius. He was credited with 2 victories such as never before fallen to the lot of one man. He had brought 2 kings captive to Constantinople, and beyond all expectation had made Roman spoils of the nations and wealth of Geseric and Theodoric. In the Eastern Roman capital, Belisarius has been welcomed back from Italy as a hero. He and his entourage draw admiring crowds wherever they go. But he does not have long to enjoy his success. In early 541, Justinian sends Belisarius east to take command of Roman forces in Syria and ensure there is no repeat of the previous year's disaster. Belisarius's wife, Antonina, has accompanied him on previous campaigns to North Africa and Italy and proved herself a valuable advisor and deputy. But this time, she remains in Constantinople to advise her friend and patron, Empress Theodora. Belisarius gathers...
Isn't the Empress against Belisarius? I know at some point he's gonna get betrayed by Justinian in fear of him becoming too strong. But
all available forces at Dara, site of his great victory 11 years before. He has his own household troops, the elite Bucellari, Ostrogoths who've joined him in Italy, Rome's Hassanid Arab allies, led by Al-Harith, and several thousand Limitani, the Empire's frontier troops. Procopius does not tell us the size of these forces, so we can only make educated guesses based on circumstantial evidence. Local Roman forces are shaken by the events of the previous year. Belisarius spends several weeks reorganizing these men, re-equipping them, and rebuilding their shattered morale. When Belisarius learns that Khosrow and the main Persian army are far away in the north, campaigning in Lazica, he decides to go on the offensive and targets the Persian city of Nisibis. This fortified frontier city is too strong to assault directly, but Belisarius hopes the garrison can be lured out and defeated in battle, allowing his troops to rush into the city, mingled with the retreating enemy. Belisarius camps 5 miles from Nisibis, close enough to tempt the Persians to attack, but far enough that they can't easily retreat back to the city.
Smart.
But one Roman commander, Peter, camps far too close.
Peter!
Ignores Belisarius' warning to be on high alert at noon, when the Persians are most likely to strike. The Persian commander, Nabonidus, spots this isolated Roman force and attacks. Peter immediately sends a rider to Belisarius calling for aid. But Belisarius and the rest of the army have already seen what's happening and are on their way. Before they can reach Peter, his force is hit by the Persian cavalry. After a brief fight, his troops scatter. 50 men are killed. A Roman standard is lost. When Belisarius arrives with reinforcements, he drives off the Persians, who retreat into the city, leaving behind more than 100 dead. But the loss of a Roman standard in such a pointless skirmish is a bitter blow.
Ah, Peter! Oh, like the...
Belisarius marches on to the Persian fort at Caesarion. His first attack is repelled. He digs in for a siege, while ordering Al-Harith's Arabs and 1,200 Bukhilari to cross the Tigris River and raid deep into Assyria. It has been many years since the Romans have raided this far into Persian territory. There is little resistance and much plunder.
I mean, you know, how brutal was it to live back then, man? You know, raids, slaves, wars every few years. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Caesarion runs out of food and surrenders to Belisarius. But the Roman general has run out of time. His troops are exhausted by the extreme summer heat, and a third are sick. His Limitani wish to return to their homes, now threatened by the start of the Arab raiding season. While Al-Harith and his men have gone AWOL. It later emerges they've ridden straight home to avoid sharing their loot with the Romans.
Oh, the bitches!
Belisarius, having achieved as much as he can with his limited force, withdraws back into Roman territory. At the opening of spring, Khosrow, son of Kavad, for the third time began an invasion into the land of the Romans with a large army, keeping the Euphrates River on the right. The Emperor Justinian, upon learning of the inroad of the Persians, sent Belisarius against them once more. 542 AD. Belisarius spends the winter in Constantinople, but in early spring, news arrives that Khosrow is preparing to invade again. Belisarius races back to the Eastern Front, using horses of the famous Cursus Publicus, the Roman postal service, with fresh remounts at every stage.
Okay, that's insane.
A journey
that there was a postal service in the 1600 years ago. There was a postal service. Hello, what? This is insane to me. Okay, everything else, yeah, there were battles, plagues. That's good. But there was a postal service in 542, like...
that normally takes a month, can be completed in around 8 days.
Jesus Christ.
Local commanders warn that Khosrow is approaching with the biggest army yet. They want to hole up in Hierapolis and hide behind its strong walls. Belisarius has a different plan.
That's right, he's not craven.
If Khosrow were attacking any other people but Romans, this plan of yours would be safe and sensible. But as immediately after leaving here, this barbarian plans to fall upon some other territory of the Emperor, be assured that to die bravely would be better in every way than to be saved without a fight. For this would justly be called not salvation, but treason. So come as quickly as possible to Europos, where, after collecting the whole army, I hope to deal with the enemy as God permits. Khosrow is counting on another lucrative...
You know one of the things I love about history the most, personally, is that there's no real bad guy. Like in this situation, you can, because we're getting the point of view of Belisarius, it's very easy to paint the Assyrians, the Sassanids, in a bad light. Oh, they're raiders, oh, they're the villains. But from their point of view, they're their quote-unquote main character in their story. So that's why history is so interesting, because when you read history about, you know, I'm not saying that there is not like evil people in history that are evil just for the sake of being evil. But, you know, there are situations like this one, like, who's the bad guy? Is it the Sassanids for invading? Maybe. But, you know, the Romans invaded as well. So it's much more...
plundering expedition. This time he plans to raid Palestine and pillage Jerusalem. But when he hears Belisarius himself has arrived and is gathering a Roman army at Europos, he hesitates.
What?
He sends an envoy, Abandanes, to meet Belisarius on the pretext of reopening negotiations, but really to gauge his strength.
Okay.
For almost the first time in 10 years, Procopius is not at Belisarius' side. He has remained in Constantinople. In fact, his days of campaigning with the great Roman general are over. Nonetheless, he provides a detailed description of what follows.
That's insane.
Belisarius...
It's insane that the guy wrote books in 550, 540, whatever. He wrote books, he was a historian, on what happened. And you might say, oh, how accurate they were. He wrote books in 540, and they're, I'm gonna assume, based on because this video is happening, they're still available today? What? That's insane.
Meets Khosrow's envoy far from the Roman camp, surrounded by an imposing number of his most fearsome warriors, including Thracians, Illyrians, Goths, and Vandals. They have been hand-picked to make an impression. All are tall, strongly built men, armed to the teeth, and seem completely unconcerned by the arrival of a Persian envoy. Belisarius himself speaks in a carefree manner. This course that Khosrow has chosen is not how men usually behave. If other men have a dispute with their neighbour, they first try to negotiate with him, and only go to war if they do not receive satisfaction. But he first comes into the midst of the Romans, and then makes suggestions about peace. With that, Belisarius dismisses the envoy. The envoy returns to Khosrow and urges the king to avoid battle at all costs. The enemy are not like any men he's seen before. They are formidable and disciplined. Their commander is wise and imposing. The king should withdraw as soon as possible.
I'm gonna assume here, I'm taking a guess, he doesn't follow his advice?
Khosrow takes his advice.
Oh!
The Persian army crosses the Euphrates and marches
I
home.
misjudge him, okay, I misjudge him, I deal with so many, you think king, you think someone who's ruled by his, by greed, by pride. No, smart guy, man.
Belisarius appears to have bluffed a stronger enemy into retreat and saved huge swathes of the empire from plunder and pillage.
Nice.
According to Procopius, the Romans praised Belisarius. He seemed to have achieved greater glory in their eyes by this feat than when he brought Gelimer or Vitiges captive to Constantinople. In truth, it was an achievement of great importance and deserving great praise, at a time when all the Romans were hiding in terror behind their defenses. Belisarius and his Bucalari, putting on a show that is so intimidating and deceptive that the Persian king abandons his campaign. It's a famous and memorable scene. But did it ever happen?
Ooh.
Many historians believe that something even more terrifying caused Khosrow's rapid withdrawal. He'd discovered the empire was riddled with plague.
Okay.
During these times, there was a pestilence
which
came close to wiping.
It's a nice legend. The guy sat around with all his, his most fearsome warriors, and he portrayed himself as this carefree warrior that has the moral high ground. But logically, it makes a great story, but it makes much more sense if the empire was really plagued and you're the opposing king. It makes much more sense to not go into it. So
out the whole of mankind. Now, in the case of all other scourges sent from heaven, some explanation or cause might be given by daring men. But for this calamity, it is quite impossible either to express in words or to conceive in thought any explanation, except indeed to refer it to God. The 6th century world is full of strange and mysterious phenomena. Sometimes even a highly educated man like Procopius can only record his observations and trust in God. Of the year 536, he wrote, "It came about during this year that a most dread portent took place. The whole year the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, and it seemed much like an eclipse, for its beams were not clear, nor like those it usually makes. From the time when this thing happened, men were free neither from war, nor pestilence, nor any other thing that brings death."
Whew. What
Experts now believe Procopius was observing the atmospheric aftermath of a massive volcanic eruption. In fact, a cluster of volcanic activity around this date would help to trigger what's become known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age. Its impact is impossible to measure, but it may have contributed to food shortages and worsened the famine that Procopius witnessed in
You know what's interesting when you think about history? You look at history and on this graph you go from 500 AD all the way to 700 like it's no big deal. 200 years. But when you're in it, 2022, 20 years go by, 30 years, it's a lifetime. Whereas on the graph, 200 years go by, you're able to see, it's weird how history works. You can skip decades by just flipping a page, which is insane when you think about it.
Italy. Such shortages made the population weaker and more vulnerable to what came next. It originated among the Egyptians who live in Pelusium. From there it branched out in 2 directions. The first moving to Alexandria and then the rest of Egypt. The second coming to the Palestinians who live by the border of Egypt. Plague is first recorded in the Nile Delta in 541. It spreads across Egypt and into coastal Palestine. In spring 542, it reaches the imperial capital, Constantinople. It spreads rapidly across the empire. In 543, plague reaches Persian-ruled Armenia and the Kingdom of the Franks.
Jesus Christ!
Recently, plague victims have even been identified in Anglo-Saxon England.
What?
Procopius has been identified in Anglo-Saxon England.
Look at this, man. Look at this. Talk about a plague. All the way from Persia to London. That's insane.
Procopius is in Constantinople when the plague strikes with full, terrifying force. They fell ill in the following way. Suddenly they became feverish. Some of them when they rose from sleep, others while they walked about or doing any small thing. The body did not change color or become warm like a regular fever, nor did it burn up. Rather, at first, the fever was so mild that it gave no cause for alarm, either to victims or the doctors who treated them. But then on the same day or the next, a bubonic swelling appeared. This happened around the groin, also inside the armpit, sometimes by the ears or the thigh.
That is disgusting, though. Ugh.
Some victims, Procopius writes, fall into a coma-like state, unable to feed or care for themselves. Others are seized by madness, shouting wildly and running into the streets. Some died immediately, others after many days. In some cases, the body blossomed with dark pustules about the size of a lentil. These people did not survive a single day. They all died immediately. Many others suddenly began to vomit blood and perished immediately. I must also state,
if COVID had those kinds of symptoms, dude, because in many ways, what happened during the past 2 years, what we went through was much more, it's gonna sound bizarre, but aesthetic, if I want to, it sounds weird, I know, but it wasn't like overly gross. There were like no bubonic things coming out of your skin. It was just, if you, passed away, It was all internal, the lungs and all that. So, but if it was this and the visuals and it was shown on TV, the panic would be 10 times worse, in my opinion.
That the most eminent doctors predicted that many would die who shortly afterwards were unexpectedly free of all sickness. They also claimed that many would survive who were destined to perish almost immediately. Thus there was no cause behind this disease that any human reason could grasp. For in all cases, the outcome made little sense.
You know, growing up, I always thought to myself, how could people believe in God? And I've always been a cynic, of course, always pessimist. But, you know, I was like, well, how can you believe that? There's some guy in heaven, in the clouds, dictating everybody, you know, everybody's will, everybody's faith. You know, when you see some people die just cause, you know, horrible deaths, how can you justify it? Anyways, getting off topic here, but as time went on and I grew older, I can understand why people back then believed in the God so with such fervor, because, you know, imagine you're walking around, you have a normal life, you know, wars, as normal it could be back in the day, and then out of nowhere this plague comes around, kills everybody indiscriminately, rich, poor, men, women, children, old people. If you don't believe, that's when you're like, God is punishing us for something. I mean,
analysis of human remains from this and later pandemics has identified the cause of this terrifying disease, a deadly bacterium called Yersinia pestis. Procopius is at the center of the world's first bubonic plague pandemic. The second, 8 centuries later, is known as the Black Death.
Oh shit, 800 years went by?
The peak of the pandemic lasts 3 months. On the very worst days, the death toll in Constantinople alone may be as high as 10,000.
What?
Between a third and half the city's population perish. Entire households are wiped out.
Jesus
the city's
Christ.
graveyards overflow.
10,000 people in one city a day? I mean, I know that Constantinople was a big city. Actually, I have no idea, I'm just talking, but it was the capital, of course, it must be huge. But 10,000 a day? Jesus.
And corpses are crammed into city watchtowers. It was not easy in those times to see anyone out and about, for all were holed up in their homes. If you happened to chance upon someone going out, he was carrying one of the dead. All work came to a standstill. The plague hits the Empire's great cities hardest, but the pestilence also reaches deep into the countryside. Then Emperor Justinian himself falls sick.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, nobody's exempt.
News soon reaches the army in Syria. There are even rumors that the emperor is already dead. Belisarius and his generals discuss the situation, but we have no reliable information on what is said or by whom. Justinian has no children. The succession will be an uncertain and dangerous time. Their own role may be decisive. They may even discuss who among them is best placed to succeed the emperor.
You know, when you think about it, you think of the famous line from Game of Thrones of, you know, you play the game of politics, Game of Thrones, you win or you die. And back in the day, that was it. You played it, I mean, you won or you died. That was it. It was so precarious when you think about the politics of the day, that even if you don't want to be involved, you know, you're a famous general, but you don't care about politics, you don't want to be emperor, people will still come after you because, for, you know, a perceived threat or whatever.
Unexpectedly, Justinian makes a full recovery. But Empress Theodora has learned of the generals' meeting in Syria. Her informers tell her that Belisarius and another general, Buzes, had said they would not support any new emperor proclaimed in Constantinople. Theodora regards these words as treason,
Is that
a clear sign they will turn against her if her husband should die.
Is she the Cersei Lannister of the 6th century?
Belisarius and Buzes are summoned to Constantinople for questioning. Theodora cannot prove their treason, but both men experience a sudden, dramatic fall from favor. Procopius claims that Buzes spends more than 2 years in a secret prison. Belisarius, the emperor's most successful general, escapes imprisonment, but his disgrace is total. He is dismissed from command and loses much of his fortune. His famed Bucellari are split up and distributed amongst other commanders. Belisarius lives in Constantinople as a private citizen for more than a year. While abroad, Justinian's empire slides towards crisis. The plague has killed a multitude of Roman citizens and soldiers, and severely disrupted government, trade, and taxation. In Armenia, a Roman offensive ends in humiliating defeat. In North Africa,
I'm gonna gather a little guess. There will be a crisis, and just Belisarius will be begged to come back to save the empire. Yeah.
Berber rebels defeat the Romans and kill Solomon the governor. While in Italy, the Ostrogoths have rallied under a new king, Totila, retaken most of Belisarius's gains, and again threaten Rome itself.
Jesus Christ, that was quick.
Justinian is desperate for a general who can take command in Italy and turn the tide of war.
Guess who?
544 AD. Belisarius is recalled from disgrace.
No!
Given back his old command in Italy.
What?
But the emperor has no troops to spare, and Belisarius's Bucellari are still in the east. This time he will have only 4,000 recruits that he must hire and equip himself to reinforce the demoralized army in Italy. And in Totila, he faces a far more dangerous adversary than before. He is poorly resourced and has been ungratefully treated by his emperor. But Belisarius loyally marches to war again, in what will prove his final campaign.
Oh shit.
Big
Coming
thanks
to an
to
end, huh?
Legendarian for providing our Total War Attila game.
That was great. Everything was incredible. The visuals, the storytelling. Oh my god. So that was the Justinian plague, right? 3 months. 3 months. 10,000 a day in Constantinople. Death. That's insane. That is mind-boggling. What else? I mean, it is pretty crazy when you think about how one person's death could mean that the whole of history changes. You know, if Arthur, Prince of Wales, didn't die, whereas Henry VIII, what would the 16th century look like? Would there have been a split in the church? I mean, everything changes, especially the further back you go. You go 1,500 years, one death, the repercussions could be mind-boggling, especially the higher up you go. You know, I mean, some deaths might not be as important, even if they're kings or emperors, you know, but, you know, some other deaths, I mean, they could be like linchpins, and everything could change. You know, like, if somehow, what's his name? William the Conqueror ended up somehow passing away, or Harald Hardrada won. You know, you can speculate. That's why I love history. You can speculate. It's very fascinating. Let's put it that way. Tell me, guys, what you thought of this. So apparently, the next episode is I'm gonna assume gonna be the last. It was great. It was a great series. Belisarius, badass, you know, getting blamed and taking names, and now he's coming back, you know. So I can't wait for the next episode. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.